property manager is facing right now is non-payment of rent. It's really that simple. So we're going to cover that, but we're also going to really focus on some eviction avoidance techniques, things that you can do to get what you want without having to use a lawyer, without having to go through the court system, because everything is such a complete mess. So we're going to cover what you can and what you can't do now, the three different types of evictions, and like I said, the eviction alternatives that you really need to learn right now, because this is going to be more important than anything else. Learning how to do an eviction is not really important right now. Learning how not to do an eviction is really what you want to focus on. Right now, I would say when I look around at my clients, and I work for thousands of people all throughout Florida, when I look around at my clients, I notice that some have very few evictions, very, very few. And there's reasons for that. And the main reason is the property manager is screening correctly, they're doing everything correctly, and it really, really cuts down on your problems. So it's just a little lesson to be learned. If you're having a lot of problems right now with delinquencies, you really need to think about the future and how you're going to do things in the future to really try to get that quality tenant. And it's going to be harder and harder to find the quality tenant. As many of you know, when you put an ad out for something, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. You might have 50 people will want that house. And out of that 50 people, you're down to 3 people, and it's not looking good. So anyway, in the past 9 months, there's been a lot of misinformation. It's been nonstop. In many cases, the tenants seem to know more than the property managers. The media is putting out a lot of information about the situation, and it's not accurate. And everyone's hearing this word moratorium, moratorium, moratorium. And this word is really messing people up. It's not just messing the tenants up, thinking that they can sit back and not pay rent. It's really hurting the property managers because you're misinterpreting what the actual CDC order is. And hopefully after this class, if you don't know it already, you're really going to be clear about it. Real quick review. CARES. Remember the CARES Act? We had to worry about all of that. That pretty much ended in the end of July, so we don't have to worry about the CARES Act. Then we had all these executive orders started to hit us. We had the governor's executive orders, which really threw us into chaos. But what it really did was threw the courts into chaos. It really, really caused the court system to be so scared because they didn't know what to do. And they're the ones who are going to be signing that final judgment and removing people. So they basically stopped doing everything. Where did all these crazy orders and things come from? Well, unfortunately, when COVID first hit, there were some groups, special interest groups, and what they did is they came up with predictions. They said there was going to be a 36% unemployment rate. They said that basically the world was going to come to an end. So they decided to do things. They acted in a way that was an overreaction, and they created a bigger problem than we actually really have. There's some good news we have right now. Rental assistance money is out there, and it looks like you're going to see more and more of it. We're going to talk about that in a little later. The bad news is some of you have those few tenants who have really got you good. They owe an incredible amount of money, an incredible amount. And these are really, really problems. Now, going back to the misinformation, we've got people who think that they do not have to pay the rent. And we also have some property managers out there who think that there is some sort of moratorium and your hands are completely tied. And that's simply not the case. Right now, we're going to focus on the CDC order. The CDC order that is supposed to now expire on January 31st. But everything is changing this week, and everything I'm telling you right now could change in a week or two. But right now, the CDC order that's been in effect expires on January 31st of this month. So here we have a situation where we need to understand what this order actually is. When the order first came out, everybody thought, oh my God, we can't file an eviction. There's a moratorium, we can't file an eviction. And that's what a lot of people were going on for a little while. Then the news started to come out. The government actually clarified something in a court case. They clarified, they said, no, You can file evictions for non-payment of rent. You can file evictions for anything you want. But if the tenant gives you what's called this declaration, then the eviction will be held up at the very end. The non-payment of rent eviction will be held up at the very end. So that was the first misconception. Everybody thought it applied to everything. Everybody thought that there was a moratorium, but the truth is it only applied to certain tenants with certain types of evictions, non-payment of rent evictions, in certain circumstances, meaning that they had to give you this form, this declaration. So the three types of evictions. We have non-payment evictions. Everyone knows those. We have non-compliance evictions. You all know what they are: unauthorized pets, unauthorized occupants, you name it. And then we have non-renewal evictions. Those are when you non-renew a lease, or if it's a situation where you have month to month, you are non-renewing your month to month. The CDC order right now, that is supposed to end on January 31st, and that has been in effect for a few months now, only applies to non-payment of rent evictions. So get that in your mind straight right now. Non-payment of rent evictions only. That's what we're talking about. Now, when the new administration comes in, will they change this and make it apply to everything? We don't really know what's going to happen. It could be a complete ban on all evictions. We don't know. We don't think it's going to be, but we don't know. But right now, let's focus on what we do know, because that's the important thing right now. So non-payment of rent evictions right now are impacted by the CDC order in certain circumstances. And what it will do, if the CDC order impacts it, it will stop that eviction at a certain point in the process. And that point is the end. Okay, how does it stop? How does an eviction get stopped by this law? The eviction gets stopped if the tenant serves you with or files with the court a declaration. A declaration is a form that they get off the internet. It's everywhere. It's a declaration. And that's where the tenant says that they've used their best efforts to get assistance. They make less than $99,000 a year. They would become homeless if they were evicted. So this is a form that they either give you or give the court. Now, if they do that on a non-payment of rent eviction right now, it halts the eviction. That halt is supposed to end on January 31st. So you see right now, there's a lot of evictions that are now held up. They're in this holding pattern in certain circumstances. Oddly enough, only 25% of the people who are being evicted for non-payment of rent give this declaration. So let's move on. If the tenant gives you this declaration during a case, it's going to impact your non-payment of rent eviction case. That's it. Now let's do a little Q&A on this end here. I'm going to go through some of the most common questions. Can you serve 3-day notices right now, 7-day notices, notices of non-renewal? Can you charge late charges? Can you do all those things right now for everybody? Yes, the answer is yes. And there was some misunderstanding about that. Can you file non-payment of rent evictions right now, today, even if the tenant gives you this form called the declaration? The answer is yes, you can. It's no problem at all. So can non-payment of rent evictions be filed, served, and start moving through the court right now? Declaration or no declaration? The answer is yes, absolutely. Will some tenants fill out this declaration form and lie? They'll lie on it. They'll say that here they are, they're working. You know they're working. You know that they just bought a new car, and they lie on this form. Can they do that? Yes, and it will stop the non-payment of rent eviction. Now, what about if you file an eviction and the tenant doesn't give you this form? Non-payment of rent eviction, tenant doesn't give you any form. Will it go to all the way to the end, and could you have a tenant evicted? Yes, you can. So there is some good news to all of this. And the other good news too, we didn't see an eviction tsunami. You heard those words. There was going to be this huge flood of evictions. We didn't see that. We did see a lot of money poured out into rental assistance. We did see that. The amount of delinquencies are not anywhere near what they were projected to be, not even close. So things are actually doing pretty good. In certain areas of Florida, worse than others. here in the Lee County area, Lee County, Collier County, Charlotte County, it's really not that bad when it comes to delinquencies. Now, parts of the state are different. Orlando has a really serious problem because of the tourism issue, and Miami has a much more serious problem. But right now, things are really not that bad. Okay, so that's in a nutshell, that's your eviction situation. Non-payment is affected by the CDC order. Non-renewal evictions, non-compliance evictions, you can file them as planned and proceed as normal. And people are being evicted right now for all of that right now. Hopefully, in a week, 2 weeks, we're not going to see that change. Hopefully, it's going to simply be an extension of our current CDC order, but we don't know what's going to happen. And that's why it makes it so important for you all to keep up on this stuff. One of the ways that you could keep up, of course, being active with the realtors, being on the mailing lists, reading the mail that comes. We all get buried in junk mail. We look at it as junk mail, but a lot of that has very important information. The Apartment Association, the National Association of Realtors, National Multi-Housing Council, they've all been working really hard to try to protect the landlord. But a lot of you don't feel that way because you're not seeing it. Well, you got to start reading the stuff that's coming in. Now, what are some eviction alternatives? What can we do if we have a situation where the law changes over the next couple of weeks and it gets really bad? If we have a situation where the tenant gives you that declaration form and it's a non-payment of rent eviction, if we have that situation, what can we do to avoid all of that? And this is where we need to dive in deep. Payment arrangements. There's nothing that prohibits you from taking partial payment. There's nothing that prohibits you from making a payment arrangement with your tenant right now. There's absolutely nothing. The key is to use the right form. You're welcome to take all the forms off of evict.com. You could email me anytime at info@evict.com. I'll send you all this stuff. There's no charge. And most of you know me already. I've been around for 31 years now. And we give this stuff all out for free. You're just on your own. We give it to you, watch the video about it, do a payment arrangement, do a payment plan, but use the right form. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by using the wrong form. The next thing that's really important, the option that you have is the agreement to vacate. The agreement to vacate. Now, what is that? This is simply where you go to your tenant and you say, Mr. Tenant, you haven't paid rent in 2, 3, 4, 5 months. If you agree to vacate on such and such a date, we will not file an eviction. Now, they might come back at you and say, well, you can't file an eviction against me. And that's where you need to educate your tenant. You say, no, that's not true. We are allowed to file an eviction against you. Check the courthouse, check the news. Evictions are being filed every single day. Thousands of them are being filed every single day. So you need to tell your tenant, no, you can be evicted. Not only can you be evicted, Mr. Tenant, but if we file an eviction against you, that eviction is going to haunt you for a long time, 5, 10, 15 years. Evictions stay on the record, win or lose. That eviction filing stays on the record. And all of you as property managers, you might rent to somebody with bad credit. But when you see an eviction, that's a huge red flag. And most people do not do that. So there's this form. It's called an agreement to vacate. And I have a video on, and it's free. The video is free as well. Everything I'm referring to is free. So just go to evict.com and get it and use it. The agreement to vacate. You can present it to them, and sometimes they say, no, I have nowhere to go. Then say, well, here, I'm going to give you a week to think about this. And if you sign this form, and if you say you're going to leave on a certain date, we will hold off. We will not file an eviction against you. And what you do, you let them think about it. And oftentimes they start thinking about it. They look at the ramifications of being evicted. They think about their friend that they can move in with or their parents. And we see a lot of this happening right now. People are moving in with other people. You'd be shocked. You would be absolutely shocked at how many times tenants will move voluntarily. Now, some of them will sign that form and they will not move. I could then file an eviction because they failed to move. So it's not a non-payment of rent eviction. It's like a holdover eviction. It's like a non-renewal eviction. And those are not impacted by the current laws we have that hold the eviction at the very end. So that's a really, really good option to try with your tenant. Keep pushing your tenants to get rental assistance funds. It looks like, from what we've all read, and I've got a bunch of materials I'm going to send you that where you could really dive into this if you have to leave earlier, if you didn't quite get it the first time around. There's a lot of money that's supposed to be released. According to the Biden plan, there's something like $40 billion that's going to be released for rental assistance. And we're hoping the government gets it right this time around, because the first time around they were giving it to the tenant and it wasn't making it back to the landlord. Only in a few places in Florida did it go directly to the landlord. And that was a really bad thing. Could you imagine handing a tenant, here the government is handing a tenant a check for $4,000. Well, do you think that tenant's going to run and pay their rent? A lot of tenants ran and bought a car. And that's a really rough thing that we had to deal with. And so the second time around, we're hoping in the Biden plan that they will have direct rent assistance that goes from the government to the landlord or to the property manager who's dealing with the property. So you're going to keep pushing that. Tell your tenants, go get that money as soon as it's out there. Most of it's run out by now, but go to the county, go to the city, go to legal aid. Tell them to go to legal aid and get the information that legal aid puts out. Legal aid has sheets that says where to get the money. A lot of property managers that I work for, they were kind of lazy. They just sat back and they threw up their hands and they said, well, my tenant hasn't paid rent in 3-4 months and I don't know what to do. And when there was money downtown, there was a lot of money, but the tenants didn't care. You gave up, not realizing that you really needed to get out there and tell your tenants where this money is. You've got to do the work. Cash for keys. Let's talk about cash for keys. A lot of people hate that idea, cash for keys. I can't believe that we would give our tenant money to leave. That sounds horrible. They owe me 3 months rent, 4 months rent, and the landlord or the person I'm working for, or I as a landlord, I'm going to cut a check out for $2,000 to let a tenant, to have a tenant leave. It's horrible. But if the Biden plan extends the eviction moratorium on certain evictions, if that gets extended until September 30th, which is what it's projected to be, that's what's come out so far. If that happens, what's better? Paying your tenant $2,000 to leave or having your tenant live rent-free until September 30th? That's really scary stuff. You have to learn what cash for keys is. You have to think about it as an option. Your owner might want to sell the house. You got to get the tenant out. A lot of buyers, they don't want to buy a house right now with a tenant that's in there that hasn't paid 3 months rent and inherit that kind of a problem. Often tenants kill deals because they don't leave. But that cash for keys, last resort, that cash for keys often works, and you need to learn how to do it right. I have a video on cash for keys, and watch that video so you do it right, because you could do it wrong. You don't want to give any money to a tenant and then have them turn around and say, thank you very much. And then they end up walking away and you don't have your keys yet. So you have to know what you're doing with that. Okay. So now you've tried these different alternatives. You've tried these agreement to vacate, cash for keys, you push them to get rental assistance, and nothing's working. Nothing's working. What's your last resort for the non-paying tenant? Now remember, I'm saying the non-paying tenant. If you've got a non-renewal, it's no problem filing those evictions. You non-renew your tenant. If they don't leave, we file an eviction. Piece of cake. They're moving right through. Non-compliance, they're doing something wrong. You serve your 7-day notice to cure. They fail to cure, we file an eviction. There's no problems with that. It's the non-payers that are causing a problem. So here it is. You don't know what to do. Your tenant hasn't paid the rent. They're not taking you up on any of your offers for alternatives. So what do? You file an eviction. So we go ahead and we file. It's a normal non-payment of rent eviction. If the tenant does not present that CDC declaration, the eviction right now under current law will go right through. If the tenant does give you that CDC declaration, it's going to most likely stop the eviction. Right now, it's going to stop until January 31st. But under the Biden plan, it could stop it until September 30th. So that's big, big stuff there. Now you might say to yourself, why bother filing an eviction? My tenant already gave me that declaration form. My tenant already told me they don't have any money, and they told me that I can't evict them. Why should you even bother filing an eviction? Well, here's why. If you don't file an eviction and you do absolutely nothing, nothing's going to happen. The tenant will sit there potentially until September 30th. They might do nothing, just sit. If you do file an eviction, which you're allowed to do, if you do file an eviction, what are some of the results that you're going to get from that eviction? What are the results? Well, you might have them evicted. No declaration, the eviction will go through. Unauthorized occupant or non-compliance eviction, non-renewal eviction, they're going to go through. But that non-payment of rent eviction, why bother filing? Why bother? Why not? Why? Because you're going to usually get some results. What are some of these results? It shakes the tenant up. They've been sitting there for 2, 3, 4, or 5 months, not paying rent. You haven't really bothered them because there's nothing that you thought you can do. Now they get hit with papers from the courthouse. The sheriff or the processor puts those papers on the door or hands them to them. That usually changes someone's tune a little bit. Now, some don't care. Some people don't care. But the majority of people, the majority of tenants do not want to be evicted. And like I said earlier, they don't want to have an eviction on their record either once they know the consequences. So if you file an eviction, even though in some cases you may not be able to complete that eviction due to current or future law, you're going to get some action. What is that action? That action could be they will come to you and say, I don't want to be evicted. I'm willing to go get the rental assistance. I'm willing to pay the rent. I'm willing to do a payment plan. I'm willing to agree to vacate on a particular date. And we have a thing called a stipulation, and that's a court order where the tenant says, I will leave on January 25th. And that's a court order. They sign it, then it becomes a court order when the judge signs it. You don't have to go to court for this. We just submit it to the court. And the judge signs it. And then if they don't leave on January 25th, the eviction will continue, declaration or no declaration. So it gets action out of your tenant. Again, it needs to be last resort. We're not going to run to filing an eviction. But if you do file an eviction, things happen, and oftentimes they're good things. They get that tenant to wake up and realize, hey, I need to do something. Let me see what I can do with my landlord right now so I don't have that eviction filed. Maybe it's cash for keys again. You're going to, even after you file the eviction, you're going to offer an out. You're going to offer them cash for keys or the agreement to anything that you want to do. You can do this. Okay. Now, before you file that eviction, before you even decide to file an eviction, you need to prepare a little bit because you've got a lot of people who have been sitting there for a long time. You haven't done an eviction in a long time. Some of you haven't touched an eviction in months. Maybe you've never had an eviction. And now all of a sudden, it's time. You're going to be filing an eviction. What do you need to do? You have to go through some preparation before you even begin the process. You want to win. You don't want to have a defect in your case cause you a problem. And more tenants are getting lawyers, free lawyers right now. In fact, that's part of the plan, is to provide free lawyers for every tenant. And that will change things. But I'm never worried about lawyers. I never worry about a lawyer representing a tenant if the paperwork is done right. If my 3-day notice is right, if the eviction is done right, if the prep work has been done properly, the lawyer doesn't really have a defense. So I'm not so worried about lawyers representing tenants, especially if you do things right. What do we need to do to prepare? Well, first of all, before you even think about filing a non-payment of rent eviction, you're going to look at the lease. Here you go. You look at the lease and you look at it and you say, wow, this lease expired 2 months ago. That's really good news. What do you need to do? Serve your notice of non-renewal. Now, if you've got a month-to-month tenant right now, you could have served your notice of non-renewal on the 15th of January, but a lot of you missed it. You missed that date. You totally missed it. And now you're going to say, well, I'll file a note. I'll give a notice of non-renewal right now and tell them they have to be out in 15 days. It doesn't work that way. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. I'm going to explain how to non-renew people properly. But you got to make sure you non-renew people. If their lease is coming to an end, or if they're month to month, you would be crazy not to non-renew. Non-renew. Now, why do you want to non-renew? Because those evictions are not impacted right now by the laws. They're not impacted by the CDC order. They're not impacted by the declaration. And I've had people, this kills me because it happens all day long. I've had property managers call me up or email me, and they said, Harry, I got a tenant, hasn't paid rent in 4 months. And I said, okay. Then my first question out of my mouth is, are they on a lease? And the property manager usually says they were on a lease, but it expired 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And then I say to them, well, did you non-renew? And you want to know what? So many of them tell me, no, I didn't non-renew. I guess I'll non-renew now. And then I say, well, it's January 19th. You don't have 15 days left in January. You should have done it on the 15th or prior. So now, because of the property manager's error, because of that mistake in the property manager not knowing they could have non-renewed and filed an eviction, the tenant could have been out months ago. We've been filing non-renewal evictions for months and months and months, never stopped. Because of that mistake, you just cost your owner a significant amount of money, because now you have to give a notice of non-renewal for when? For the end of February. And then after February is over, then you could file an eviction for that non-renewal. So you need to understand this, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. Communication. Communication is crucial. Some of you, your tenants are angry, you're angry, and you stop communicating. It's the worst thing you could do. When you stop communicating, you're never going to get anywhere. You need to focus on that tenant and talk to that tenant. What are your plans, Mr. Tenant? What are you doing here? What's going on? If you don't communicate, you get nowhere. And a lot of people, you've just gotten fed up and you've stopped communicating. So your first step in everything is to look at the lease, see if there is one. If the lease expired, and think about this, this has been going on for 9 months. What's the chances that a lease expired in the past 9 months? Like 2/3 chance, 66% chance that a lease has expired in the last 9 months. So a lot of you have a lot of your tenants on month to month right now. And don't rush to put them on new leases either. Not right now. Let them stay month to month. Don't worry, there's no sales tax ramifications or anything like that. Don't rush to putting them on a lease. Okay, so that's one thing you're going to do. You're going to see if you got people on month to month. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to see, well, when is the lease up? If it's not month to month, when is the lease up? Oh, the lease is up at the end of February. You're going to run to the lease and see how much notice needs to be given. How much notice does your lease require to end a lease? And you got to follow that, because most leases say 30 or even 60 days notice. So the soonest you can non-renew that lease, if they're on a lease, would be according to your lease. Your lease is very important. You got to look at the lease and see what it says and follow what it says. And there's all different ones. Now, the FAR bar lease has a beginning date and an ending date. It doesn't require notice from either party, but always give notice no matter what. You don't want to rely upon that. But that's the good thing about the FAR bar lease, if you've got that in place, is that it begins on such and such a date, ends on another date. There's no notice required to give the tenant, but you're going to give notice. It's kind of giving you a little more flexibility now, because your lease, if you're using that lease, it doesn't say 30 or 60. Okay, so here we go. That's step one. Are they on a month to month? Is the lease up? Now, how do we non-renew someone properly? We use a form. What is that form called? Is it called a 15-day notice? Is it called a 30-day notice? No. Don't listen to anybody. When you go on Facebook and hear people say, oh, I'm going to give my tenant a 15-day notice. I'm going to give my tenant a 30-day notice. Don't listen to those people. There's no such thing in the law as a 15-day notice or a 30-day notice. It's called a notice of non-renewal. Notice of non-renewal. that would be given on a month to month. It would be given at least 15 days before the end of the month. And then it would end on the end of the month. That's the form that you use. Watch the video we have on the non-renewal mistake, how to non-renew a month-to-month tenancy, and how to non-renew a lease. Very important to do this right, because a lot of you are not used to this. You're used to renewing people. Everything is new to a lot of people right now. It's not new to us because we've been doing it for years, but to you, this is new. And the mistakes are made all day long. You're going to look at that. Look at the lease, look at the tenancy. Now, how about this? You go out, how do you serve a notice? Well, some of you think that you could email a notice to a tenant. Could you show me in the law where it says you could email a notice? Suppose your lease says you could email a notice. Does that work? No. Right now, under Florida law, you cannot do that. Sure, you could email a notice, but if that's your primary method of giving notice, that's not going to work. That could be challenged. Now, emailing is fine, texting is fine, but you're going to serve notices the proper way. What does that mean? Knocking on the door, hand delivering it, or going to the door and taping it to the door. And if you're ever afraid to do this, if you're ever scared of being assaulted by a tenant or getting killed, and it happens, if you're ever scared, use a process server. The process server can do it for you. If you are going to go out there yourself, it's a good idea to bring a witness with you just for safety and also to prove it. Think about this. Tenant gets a notice on their door telling them they have to be out in 17 days. That's pretty radical. Have you ever been told you had to leave your office or leave your home in 17 days? Probably not. So how do some tenants react? Sometimes they say, we'll just make believe we didn't get the notice. We'll just tell the judge that we never got notice. So I asked the property manager, I said, how did you serve the notice? And the property manager says, oh, I taped it to the door. I go, well, did you bring anybody with you? No. Well, I took a picture of it. It's okay, that's good. Tenants will deny receipt of notice. This happens. So you need to be very careful. This is a very radical notice. Telling somebody that they have to leave is a big deal. And you don't want to have your case get messed up because a tenant says, I didn't get that notice. And they do that. So a lot of you, we're all doing everything by email and texting these days. Everyone is doing that. So we're all electronic. But when it comes down to the notices, you've got to follow the plan. Another thing, before you file an eviction, what do you need to do? Check to see if you've signed any social services forms. Tenants are going to be coming to you with these forms. They're called social services forms. They're rental assistance forms. And some of you are grabbing your pen and you're signing it. You're signing these forms. You're handing it back to the tenant so the tenant can go get money. The problem is you don't realize what you signed. You signed an agreement that says that you're going to possibly get money. You're going to wait to get this money. And you're also agreeing that you're not going to file an eviction for maybe 1 or 2 months. Be careful what you sign. When somebody shoves a piece of paper in front of your face, don't take out that pen real fast. Read what you're signing. In Orlando, in Orange County, they've got this thing now where there's direct rental assistance to landlords. But if the landlord signs it and accepts this back rent, they also have to agree not to file an eviction for a couple months. And some people, they don't realize that that is the case. So that's one of those things. So you're going to check to see, did you sign any social services assistance forms? The next thing you're going to do, you're going to see if you made any verbal agreements with your tenant. If you've think about this, your tenant has been paying you a little bit here and a little bit there for the past 3-4 months. Now, all of a sudden, you serve them with a 3-day notice for 4 months rent and you file an eviction. The tenant comes to court and says, Judge, I thought we had a deal. I've been paying my landlord, I've been paying the property manager $300 here, $300 there. They've been accepting it. And then all of a sudden I get hit with this paperwork. What's the problem here? You failed to tell the tenant that those deals from the past are over. But the tenant's relying upon those deals. Now they're surprised by this eviction. Could it derail an eviction? Absolutely, and it does. It does. So before you file an eviction, before you give that 3-day notice, just check. Did you have any deals with your tenants? Have you been allowing them to pay here and there? Because you need to tell them that that's over before you serve them with your 3-day notice. Written payment plans. Some of you have done written payment plans all along. So here you have these nice written payment plans that says what the tenant owes, what the tenant's supposed to pay. But the tenants haven't paid. They haven't paid. So now you go to file an eviction, but you have this payment plan that maybe was written up improperly. Look at the payment plan first before you decide to give the 3-day notice and file that eviction. Look at that. The next thing, and this one's a big one, repairs. Have any of you had tenants over the last few months tell you that they needed things repaired? I'm sure you have. And sometimes they weren't really important things, but sometimes they were pretty serious. And then you went to make the repair, and some tenants, what did they do? They wouldn't let you in. They wouldn't let your vendor in. They said, "Oh, you can't come in here. You know, I'm in quarantine, or I'm scared of getting COVID. I'm not going to let you in to make a repair." So your vendor or you got fed up, and the repair never got done. Now we go to file an eviction, and all of a sudden the tenant says, "Judge, the reason I didn't pay my rent is because my heat or my AC wasn't working 2 months ago, and they never made the repair." Now they're going to say, "But wait a minute, we tried to make the repair. They wouldn't let us in." There they are in front of the judge, and they say, "Judge, we never would have done that. We wouldn't deny them access." And you're saying, "But they did, Judge." You'd be shocked at how that could derail an eviction. So you're going to check before you file an eviction. Did you make those repairs? Are there any pending repairs that haven't been made? Whenever we file an eviction, you'll notice we always ask you that question. When you fill in that, when you go online and you send the stuff in, we ask the question, has the tenant complained about any repairs? Are any repairs not finished yet? We ask the question on purpose because that can derail an eviction. So you're going to look at that. Just a quick review. Social services forms, did you sign any? You got any payment arrangements that need to be ended? Got any written payment arrangements? You got any repairs? You're gonna check into that. Okay, so here you go. You file the eviction. If it's a non-compliance eviction or a non-renewal eviction, most likely it's going to move through in a court that's a little bit more backed up than usual, not as crazy as you would have thought it would be. If you file that non-payment eviction, the tenant can serve you with that declaration form. It's going to make its way to the judge, and the judge will most likely stop the non-payment eviction at the end. Okay. Now, let's talk about non-compliance evictions. What are they? Unauthorized occupants, unauthorized pets, the lawn hasn't been cut, it's in a condo association or a homeowners association, the homeowners association's all over the tenant. There's all kinds of non-compliances. A lot of property managers right now, they are doing everything in their power to look for a non-compliance. They're saying, "Well, Harry told me that that evictions for non-payment of rent are a problem right now." Yeah, they could really be a problem. So you're right, Harry did say that. So I'm going to look for something else. I'm going to give them a 7-day notice to cure because they've got unauthorized occupants, or they've got an unauthorized pet, or they didn't pay a pet fee, or they didn't cut the grass. Any of you been thinking that way? You're like, "I'm going to look around. I got to look away. I got to look for some way to evict these people other than non-payment of rent." Nice try. I see it all day long. Judges can see it as well. They know what you're doing. You're not going to be successful evicting a tenant because they have unauthorized occupants if you knew they had those unauthorized occupants for the past 4 months. You're not going to be successful evicting somebody for their unauthorized cat if you knew they had that cat for months. It's not going to work. I know what you're doing. You're trying as hard as possible. You're saying, I got to do anything I can. I don't want, if I file this non-payment of rent eviction, it's going to be a problem. What can I do? What can I evict them for? So you're looking for when you go on Facebook, you see oh my God, there's so many people on Facebook and they don't know what they're talking about. There's a couple of really big groups of mainly people who don't have property managers. And you see the things that they say, and they say it with such conviction. It's wrong. They're like, "Well, I'll just evict them for something else. I'll do this, I'll do that, or I filed this, or I filed that." The worst place on earth to get information is Facebook, in the landlord groups on Facebook. Now, there's some great property manager groups. You're going to get a lot of great information from them. But generally speaking, the landlord groups are bad news. Even the Florida landlord groups. Watch out what you read. Well, here you go. Got everything in place. Checked all these things, and you said, I'm ready. I'm going to give a 3-day notice. And then if they don't pay, I'm going to file an eviction. So here you go. You grab the 3-day notice and you start filling it out. And you write down on there they owe $5,000 and there's accumulated late charges of $500. And you write that down on the 3-day notice. Let's be real. What do you think a judge is going to do when he sees or she sees that $500 late charge that's accumulated over all this time? You think the judge is going to like that? No. Judges hate it. They hate it. You think you're ever going to collect that $500? Forget it. I get people all day long. They're like, Harry, this person owes me $10,000. This person owes me $15,000. This person owes me $5,000. Can you go after? I want you to go after them. I want you to collect from them. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck collecting. That's one of the first things that a new property manager doesn't realize. Collecting money in Florida is a nightmare. Evicting, very easy in Florida. Collecting, forget it. The chances of collecting are slim to none. I'm not saying no one collects. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But don't ever think for a minute or count on the fact that your tenant is collectible. Don't think it for a minute, and make sure your owners don't think that as well. Okay, so you're going to get that ready. You're going to prepare your notice, and you can take your time and do it right. The majority of cases that we file, the majority of cases that come into our office, we find little problems with the 3-day notice. Now, this is a very simple notice. Go through it step by step and do it right. If you do a 3-day notice wrong and you file an eviction and the tenant goes to legal aid or gets a free attorney because they're out there, they're everywhere, you could have your case thrown out. So it's bad enough. Things are bad enough right now. A lot of things are out of our control right now, aren't they? Where this is horrible. This has been the most crazy time in most of our lives, probably everyone. But some things are in our control. What's in our control? Knowing the law. That's in your control. What's another thing that's in our control? Doing a 3-day notice properly. That's in your control. Doing a notice of non-renewal properly. All that's within your control. And if it's in your control, you need to know how to do it. It's your duty. It's your duty. It's your fiduciary duty to your property owner to make sure that you know how to do this right. If the owners, when I see these defective things come into my office all day long, if your owner in New Jersey or New York realized that you could have filed an eviction 4 months ago and you didn't because you didn't know the law, they'd be suing you. If you send me a notice of non-renewal and it's wrong and I can't file the eviction, if your owner knew about that, how do you think they'd act towards you? Maybe that notice of non-renewal was done wrong and you killed a deal. You killed a sale. So now you have a buyer's agent is angry. The seller's agent is angry. The buyer's angry. The seller's angry. Everybody's angry because the deal goes down the drain. Whose fault was that? It might have been yours. And you say, well, I didn't know. There's no excuse for that. Please. For a property manager today to say they don't know how to do something is absolutely ridiculous. I spoon feed this stuff to you guys. Go to evict.com, watch the videos. It's all there. It's all free. I'm crazy. You guys know who I am. I'm nuts. I've been like this for years. I just figured just give it away, give it away, give it away. I still make money. I still prepare thousands of leases. I still do thousands of evictions, but I really believe in education. It's so crucial. You got to get that education. Don't do these things wrong. That's in your control. Now, here we go. Let's talk about the future and some best practices right now. Best practices is to focus on non-renewal evictions, and hopefully that won't change. What about some best practices that we need to think about right now? I would not renew a tenant right now. The lease is coming to the end, or maybe it's month to month. I would not renew a tenant right now If you feel that they're on shaky ground, I would not renew them. I would not give them a renewal. I would let them stay month to month. As long as they're paying rent, let them stay month to month. You don't have to evict them. You don't have to terminate them. Let them pay, let them stay. But if you renew a lease right now, then you're stuck. Now your only option if they stop paying the rent is to file a non-payment eviction. And if the non-payment eviction is going to be impacted by these laws past January 31st, you're doomed. So that's a really good best practice. Don't be rushing to renew people. Now you could do nothing and they just become month to month. That's how it works. Florida law, if they don't sign a new lease and you continue to let them stay, they're month to month. Or you can do a month to month lease. And we do a lot of them. We prepare the lease, but it doesn't have a beginning date and an ending date, or it has a beginning date, but no ending date. It just says month to month. And that gives you extreme flexibility if they stop paying the rent. So that's a huge best practice right now. No renewals of leases. I would just hold off unless if you've got a tenant who's doing such a great job paying the rent, there's no chance that they're going to stop paying the rent. Okay, renew their lease. But anybody that's on shaky ground, no, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it right now. Okay, what can happen for the future? Over the next week or two, we could find out that the moratorium is extended until September 30th. We could find that out. And everything that I said today is going to be true, except instead of January 31st, it's going to be September 30th. That could happen. What else will happen? Well, I told you before, billions of dollars are going to be released for rental assistance. You're going to find out about this and you're going to do the heavy lifting. You're going to do the work. You're going to contact your tenant once you find out where that money is. You're going to say, Mr. Tenant, go down and get this money. You're going to do a lot of things on behalf of your owners. It's a lot of work. But if you sit back and do nothing, that's bad news. So anything can happen within the next couple of weeks. And you just need to be prepared for all of that. You just need to be prepared. Now, what's happening on a national level and a local level around Florida? We've been very lucky in Florida. Florida is pro-landlord. It's very fair. It's not overly pro-landlord, but it's pro-landlord. So if you're a property manager and you tell me that Florida is pro-tenant, then you do not know what you're talking about. You have not been a property manager for a long time. Florida is pro-landlord. Why is that? Well, it's been that way for years. Association of Realtors, the Apartment Association, we have fought for landlords' rights for years, and we have won almost every single time. Almost any change to the Florida Landlord-Tenant Act has been advantageous to the landlord, or we killed anything that was bad for the landlord. And without FAR, without Florida Apartment Association, it never would have happened. And you know, I saw something online the other day. Somebody was complaining. They said, NAR isn't doing anything to help us. NAR isn't helping us with all these moratoriums. Now, I have my own issues with associations, whether it be NAR, FAR, National Apartment Association. But, you know, nobody's perfect. But rest assured, they are working their butts off to get a voice in government and try to get these things changed, get these things not implemented where it's so bad for the landlord. So don't for a minute think that people are not working on your behalf. They are. It's just very, very frustrating that we're dealing with this right now. Now, what's happening in Florida? Each year, things get introduced, they get fought. Usually we win. But little things are happening on the local level, county and city. Do you know that in Miami, the mayor of Miami is in charge of the sheriff's department in Miami. Not unlike here. Here, the sheriff is elected, right? The sheriff, the mayor and the sheriff have nothing to do with each other. In Miami, the mayor controls the sheriff. The mayor told the sheriff, no writs of possession. There hasn't been anybody evicted in Miami in months. Now, who gave them that power? The people give them that power, right? We give them power. What about St. Petersburg? Let's talk about the city of St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, if you want to charge late charges, you have to give this special notice to your tenant first. It's a special thing. And if you don't, you get fined hundreds of dollars. You have to give your tenant this thing about tenants' rights. And if you don't, you get fined hundreds of dollars. In some parts of Florida, Broward County, Dade County, Alachua County, you are forced to accept Section 8 if a tenant otherwise is approved. You're forced to. Now, should you be forced to enter into a government program where the government has to inspect your property and takes a long time to get the money and anything can happen? Could you believe that? Well, how did it happen? It happened on the local level, city, county. So what we're seeing is that cities and counties are getting together and they're saying, we need to change the law. We need to protect tenants, or we need to punish landlords. Now, why would you want to punish a landlord? Because of slumlords. There are some bad landlords out there, right? Some of you work for some people that are pretty bad. Most of you don't, but there are slumlords out there. Slumlords give us all a bad name. So these slumlords, they create problems. They allow drugs to occur. They allow all these problems in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood goes downhill. So what do? The town council or the county commission decides that they're going to implement laws, ordinances to punish landlords and make it harder. So who gets punished? Everybody, not just the slum landlord, but the good landlord. So what am I trying to say here? You need to be at the table. You need to know who your city council people are. You need to know who your county commissioners are. Get to know them and become more active. RPAC is extremely important, and FAR is extremely powerful. Contribute money to RPAC, but contributing money is not always enough. You need to be involved. Don't sit back and complain about how the laws are bad, how the laws seem to be hurting you. Don't do that. Don't do that unless you've done your job and sat down with the county commissioner or sat down with the city council member and had them get to know you. They're people just like you and me. They're our neighbors, but most of you couldn't name them all. Most of them aren't friends with any of them. So that's something to really think about. The other thing too is property management council. It's important in my opinion, it's important that every association or board of realtors in Florida has a property managers council. And we've had some over the years, they come and they go. Oftentimes they go. And the reason is because not enough people want to get involved. Make sure you have a property management council, at least if it's only to get 12 people on a list. And then the other thing too is NARPM. Some of you know what NARPM is, of course, the National Association of Residential Property Managers. Almost every NARPM member is a realtor, almost every single one of them. And oftentimes the NARPM groups and the realtors, they work together and they put on programs together, and it's great. So we have a NARPM chapter in Southwest Florida. We've got one in Sarasota, Orlando, Jacksonville. We got them all over the place. And they're made up of realtors. So that's another thing to consider for your future benefit, learning, and getting people together. We got to work as a group. Look, the people who are focused on sales, they got it together. They got it together. They are powerful. Property managers, we're behind, and it's hard because property managers don't have that huge power that salespeople have. But what do we have? We have the Association of Realtors, the boards of realtors, and that's a powerful group. So if you're interested in property management, if this might be new to you or you're thinking about it, if you're interested in it, get more involved and you're going to get more information. Another thing, and then we'll open it up to questions. I want to talk about some of you who should not be managing property. There are a lot of people out there, and I work for them. I work for thousands of people. There are a lot of people out there who manage properties. They have 5, 10, 15 properties. They manage properties for others. And it's nothing but headaches. It's headaches, it's heartaches, it's liability. It's a mess. It's a horrible experience. Now, why would you do that? Why would you manage 10 properties if you're not making any money? Why? I know why. Because you don't want to lose that relationship between you and that owner. Maybe you sold the owner of those houses and now you're managing the property for that owner. Are you doing it because you're so afraid that if you let somebody else manage the property, you're going to lose that owner? And then when that owner wants to buy more houses, he's not going to come to you? Yeah, that's why you're doing it. I understand, totally understand. Just like with me, when I don't take a case, I often refer cases out to other lawyers because I can't take I only do landlord tenant law, only residential. So I'll refer things to other lawyers. And there's always that nagging fear that if I refer that case out, then the next time my client has an issue, they're going to go to him or they're going to go to her. And it happens. It happens. But there are property managers out there that you could work with. Also, property management accounts. Your little portfolio of 10 accounts, 20 accounts, 30 accounts, 50 accounts, it's worth more than you think. There are people out there right now dying to buy your accounts. So this is a time for you to say, you know, maybe property management's not right for me. I'm not all in. I'm causing a problem for myself. It's too much for me to bear. I'm going to sell my little portfolio. I'm a firm believer to either be 100% in or do something else. It really, some people like to dabble here and there and do everything, but are you going to be a jack of all trades and master of none? Or are you going to focus on something, do it right, make money at doing it? Property management is one of the most miserable jobs that anyone could have. One of the highest liability jobs anyone could have. You're married to two people. You're married to the owner, you're married to the tenant. And then you got everything's going against you, everything. It's not easy. Do you want that? Or do you want to let it go, meet up with the people who want to buy your accounts and move on and focus on something else, whatever it might be, whether it be sales or whether it be whatever you want to do. So just a little tidbit from me. After doing this for so long, I work for so many of you all throughout Florida. I know your struggles. I know the people who are the winners. I know the people who maybe are not winning right now. And I deal with problems all day long. I see the struggle. If you guys have any questions about anything that we talked about, you're always free. Email me, info@evict.com. You know me, I give free advice out all the time. I do everything I can to try to help you guys. Don't be afraid to email me. You're not going to get a bill. EvictTV.com has tons of the videos. Evictforums.com has over 200 free forms and notices. It's yours. Evict.com's got links to all of that stuff. Get the information you need. There's no excuse. Let's dive into some questions if we have any. Do we have anything pop up during the class that maybe I missed if I was going too fast? We got anything? I think everybody's on mute right now. I think Angela was going to ask me any questions if she saw any questions, but it turns out I'm actually at my screen. I was going to be like I said, I was going to be in my nice little studio where I do all those videos, but I had the update. Are there any questions?
You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
And you could also put in the chat, I guess, too, right?
Yes.
Hi, I have a question. There is a difference between doing an eviction when the owner has a mortgage, different to an owner that doesn't have, that paid cash?
Okay, that's over. That's over. That was called the CARES Act. Remember, we had the CARES Act, which basically was over in July. So that's no longer, that's over. Then we had the executive orders that overlapped with the CARES Act. Those are over, the governor's orders. The only thing we have going right now is the federal CDC order that impacts certain non-payment of rent evictions in certain situations. That's all we got going right now, the order. And that order is expiring on January 31st, and something is gonna happen within the next couple weeks. So important. See, you got information a long time ago, and you maybe didn't see how that was all updated. But whether it's got financing, whether it's FHA, VA, it doesn't matter anymore. That doesn't matter. Not one bit. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What about commercial properties?
Commercial properties is not this, all these things that I talked about today, the order, the CDC order, only affect residential, only residential. Commercial is not impacted at all.
Okay, so I can have an eviction on a commercial property like before.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned about month-to-month lease. I misunderstood.
Yes, you could have month to month can be verbal. For instance, you could just have somebody rent to them right now. Just say, okay, there's going to be no lease. You just pay me $1,000 every month. That would be a verbal month to month. Now, you normally don't do that when you start out with a tenant because you have sales tax and all kinds of complications there. But when a lease expires, if you let the tenant stay there, it turns into a month to month. A lease doesn't end, normally a lease doesn't end until you end it. How do you end a tenancy? So we use the word lease, but it's really a tenancy, a month to month tenancy. Could you have a written month to month? Yes. Could you have a verbal month to month? Yes. And to terminate them in everywhere except for 2 areas in Miami where they have local ordinances, to terminate a month to month, you give at least 15 days notice prior to the end of the month. And I have 3 videos on that. If you have any questions about that, because I just got yesterday was the 18th, and sure enough, here they're coming in, and I see that they didn't give the person, they didn't serve the notice on the 16th or the 15th of this month. They forgot. They didn't read our Facebook page. I got it right on my Facebook page. I reminded everybody, don't forget, it's the 15th of January. This was last week. It's the 15th of January. Don't forget to serve your notice of non-renewal. But even before you do that, look at your lease, because some leases have a little weird clause in there that says either party must give 30 days notice or must give 60 days. So always look to your lease. You know, a lot of people email me all day long and they say, how much notice do I need to give? And the first thing I ask them, I say, I need to see your lease. I always have to say that. So that's that. I can't hear. Angie is muted, actually.
Oh,
Angie?
well, Harry, you have a couple
Okay.
questions in the chat.
Oh, all right. So what do we got? Let me take a look. If the lease is expiring and you want to let it default, let it turn into month to month, is it necessary to give a notice of non-renewal? No, it automatically becomes month to month. If you let a tenant stay there, a lease is over and you let the tenant stay there and you haven't terminated them, you haven't given them a notice of non-renewal, it just becomes month to month. Now, if they haven't paid the rent, I would non-renew them. We talked about that. That's one of the most important things. Non-renew. If your tenants haven't paid the rent, you need to non-renew your tenants, because right now, under the law right now, we could file evictions on non-renewals, and we're filing tons of them every day, and they're moving through in most cases. So you're not required to do anything. Once somebody becomes month to month, you don't have to do anything. You can non-renew them and terminate them, or you could just sit back and just let it stay the way it is.
Okay. What is the taxes on month-to-month lease? When you talk about taxes.
If you start out a tenant on month to month, if a tenant comes to you and you tell that tenant, Mr. Tenant, I don't want to do a lease with you. I want to do month to month. And the tenant might say yes. By law, you have to collect sales tax, tourist tax, local option tax, because under the law, a bona fide lease has to be 6 months and a day or more. If it's just month to month from the beginning, then you have to collect these taxes. Now, if a lease turns into month to month, they've been there for 6 months, or it's a lease that now rolled into month to month, you do not have to collect those taxes. And that's a very common question that I get. I got another question here. Can I raise rent if I do not renew? Well, how do you raise rent? You raise rent in the same fashion that you give a notice of non-renewal. If you wanted to raise the rent on somebody for January, you don't have enough time. And for February, you don't have enough time because it's January 19th. You should have done that on the 15th and said beginning February 1st, your month to month, your rent will be $1,500 a month. But you can't do that because it's the 19th. You don't have 15 days left. Okay, somebody asked a question. Can you note on declining tenant for criminal or bad credit history? What's the legal way to decline? This is a whole other topic. Some of you have been hit by this guy. There's a guy working with a lawyer, and he is calling you up. He's calling you up, and he's saying, hi, I would like to apply for your house, but I have a felony. Do you rent to people with felonies? And you know what a lot of you will say? You'll say, no, we don't. And then you will get hit with a lawsuit. There's this one attorney with this guy, he's working with this guy, and they have filed hundreds of lawsuits against property managers. Whenever anyone calls you on the phone, do never, ever, ever tell them no. Tell them they're welcome to apply. Also, some of you on your websites, you have your resident selection criteria on your website. Never say no felonies. Don't do that. Now, see, 5 years ago, that was allowed, but not anymore. 2016, everything changed. But some of you didn't keep up with the law. And since you didn't keep up with the law, there you go. You end up getting sued. So you end up having to settle for a couple $1,000s to make it go away. It's inexcusable. You shouldn't have had that happen to you. So you can decline people for criminal things. Just you need to learn how to do it. And today's class really isn't on that, so we don't have time to do that. But you are allowed to. Just do not fall for the trap. If you get that phone call from that guy or that lady and they say, hi, I'd like to apply, but I just got out of jail, or I got a couple felonies from 2 years ago, and don't fall into the trap and say no. Just say, you're welcome to apply. And we look at every application on a case-by-case basis, an individualized assessment. That's what it's called. And I've got a bunch of information on that if you need to know more. Okay, so next question. If we file an eviction for non-payment and the tenant files a declaration, will it stay on hold, or will we have to file another eviction after the date, whatever it might be? Right now it's January 31st. Will we have to file? No, it puts it in hold. If the tenant gives you the declaration or files it with the court, it puts it on hold. The end of the eviction's put on hold. It doesn't disappear. It stays there. You don't have to file a new eviction. Then as time goes on, whenever it's over, whenever the CDC order or whatever government thing is over, then it will continue. So no, you wouldn't be filing a brand new eviction. If we file an eviction for non-payment, okay, that's the same question. Can you require a minimum credit score to qualify? That's a question. Absolutely. Every one of you should have some sort of criteria where it says what your credit scoring is. Very important to have that. If I have a 6-month plus 1 day lease where the tenant leaves before the end of the lease, great question. If I have a lease, 7-month lease, or 6 months and 1 day, or 12 months, and the tenant leaves after 3 months, will you have to pay sales tax, tourist tax, all the other tax? No. The Department of Revenue looks to the lease. They look into the intent of the lease. The intent was 6 months and a day, or 7 months, or 12 months. So if a tenant packs up and leaves after a couple months, no tax is triggered.
What is the max percentage of to raise the rent? I'm sorry.
There's nothing in Florida law that says anything about how much or how. There's no limits under Florida law. There's no limits. Now,
what about the late fees?
You don't want to do something crazy like say, oh, I'm going to raise the rent so they move. No, you don't do that.
No, no, no.
You would non-renew the tenant. You would non-renew the tenant. But we're for normal conventional properties, not Section 8, not HUD, there is no limit to what you could raise rent to.
Really? So New York was 3% years ago.
Yeah.
No more than 3%.
Now, could that
What
change
about
someday? Yes, it could change someday.
Okay. What about the late fees? Is there a max or minimum amount that we can charge?
Florida has no law governing late fees. But if you charge too much, whatever that might be, this allows a judge to make a decision that you are charging too much. Could that change someday? Yes, it can. You see in other states, and every one of you should look around and see what the other states are doing. In some states, you can't charge late fees. In some states, you have a limit on late fees. In some states, you've got all these different county, city, local, all these local things that affect landlord-tenant law. We don't want that in Florida. That's why it's so important that we stick together as a group and fight, always fight for the rights, not to be unfair to people. We want to be fair, but we want to protect the landlord. So Florida continues to be the state where everybody wants to come, everybody wants to buy, and this is, in my opinion, it's the greatest state. I'm from New Jersey originally, and I love this place. I love our laws. I love everything about Florida. We got to keep it that way.
Yeah. Because in New York, people can live for free like 2 years, a year and a half. I own property there, and it was a nightmare to get rid of the tenant.
New York and New Jersey are an absolute wreck for landlords. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, let's see. If you give a 3-day notice and the tenant moves out, can you follow up with a collection agency or yes, you can. None of the laws right now, past or present, none of these orders or laws gave any forgiveness whatsoever to the tenant. None. Now, could that happen? It could. Anything could happen, right? But right now, your tenants do not have any rent forgiveness. They owe you $5,000, they owe you $15,000. At some point in time, if you decide, you can file a lawsuit, you could send them to collections, you could do whatever you want, but keep an eye on the law, because I predict based upon some stuff we've already seen in the past, I predict that there will be legislation that will protect some tenants who claim to be impacted by the COVID situation. So it's something that could happen in the future, and hopefully FAR will be there for us, NAR will be there for us, National Multi-Housing Council, National Apartment Association. Hopefully what they'll do, they'll try to protect landlords instead of just forgiving everybody their rent. But right now they owe it. There's nothing in the law that says they don't owe it. It just puts limits on what you can do about evicting them for it in certain circumstances. Got anything else? Angela, we got anything else? Angela's still on?
I am. I don't think we have any more questions. Do we have any more questions?
Do you take cases everywhere in Florida?
Yeah, we don't do Monroe County. We don't do anything in the Keys because if we have to go to court.
Oh no, but in Lee County, Sarasota.
Yeah. I actually live in Lee County. I lived here since 1989, and I moved here in 1989 from New Jersey. I lived on the beach for I think 18 years, and now I live near Bishop Verot in Caroline Woods. So I'm not too far from the association. And there's going to be more stuff this year. Just keep an eye, keep in touch with Angela, keep in touch with the realtors, and keep in touch with the NARPM. Keep an eye on our Facebook page. We always keep things updated on the Facebook page. And the main thing is don't miss out. Don't miss out.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, somebody just said, where can I find more training for the property manager? Well, of course, we have a lot of free resources, but as far as actual training goes, there's a guy named Mark Cunningham. He's got M-A-R-C is how he spells his first name, Mark Cunningham. He's got tons of videos. There's some great property management groups. The Property Management Mastermind group has access to people who can teach you. You could get tons of stuff, you know, but before you do anything, always check and make sure they're not some scammer. And you want to make sure it's Florida. Of course, operational stuff is going to be the same everywhere. But when it comes to the legal stuff, just be careful where you get your information. Now that property manager is big, everybody wants to be a property manager. You know, they find out quick enough that it's not what they thought it would be. But there's a lot of people out there who they want to get into this business, and then that creates scammers who want to sell you something, sell you packages, certifications that are just baloney. Be careful. Don't waste your money. Check with other property managers first before you shell out money for something that might not be that valuable to you.
All right, any more questions? If not, we just want to thank you, Harry, so much for being with us again this morning and sharing with our members. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.